There is a story of a monk who spent decades in the mountains seeking enlightenment. When he finally descended, villagers asked what wisdom he had gained. He smiled and said, "When I was young, I thought the mountain was a place to escape the world. Now I know it was the place to meet myself." Have you ever wondered what happens to a man when time stretches out before him, unshared, unbroken by the presence of another? What unfolds in the silence of his solitude, in the quiet chambers of his own mind? Is he diminished by the absence of companionship, or does something far more profound begin to stir within him? Could it be that the longer a man walks alone, the more he is forced to confront not the emptiness of his life, but the vastness of his own soul? We live in a world that fears solitude, that treats it like a disease to be cured, a void to be filled at any cost. We are told that to be alone is to be incomplete, that love is the missing piece without which we cannot be whole. But what if the opposite were true? What if the longer a man is single, the more he discovers a strength he never knew he had, a resilience that does not depend on the approval or presence of anyone else? This is not a speech about loneliness. This is a speech about what grows in the absence of distraction, about the truths that reveal themselves only when there is no one else to reflect them back to us. The Stoics knew this well. They understood that solitude is not a punishment, but a forge, a place where a man is hammered into something harder, sharper, more unbreakable. So let us begin there in the fire of that understanding and see what emerges from the flames. Imagine a man who has spent years alone, not by accident, not by misfortune, but by choice. Or perhaps not even by choice, but by the slow realization that he would rather stand in his own truth than kneel in someone else's illusion. What happens to such a man? Does he wither, or does he root himself deeper into the earth? The world will tell him he is missing out. That love is the highest calling, the ultimate purpose. But the Stoics ask a different question. What if the highest calling is not to love another, but to master oneself? What if the purpose of solitude is not to prepare us for someone else, but to reveal who we are when no one is watching? Think of Marcus Aurelius, ruler of an empire, yet forever an island unto himself. His journals were not addressed to a lover, but to his own soul. His wisdom was not forged in the warmth of companionship, but in the cold clarity of self-examination. He did not need another to complete him. He needed only to confront himself again and again until nothing was left but the unshakable core of his being. And so it is with the man who remains single. He is not waiting for life to begin. He is not paused in some half-lived state. He is, in fact, living more intensely than most, because he has no choice but to face himself every day. No distractions, no excuses, no one to blame or lean upon, just the raw, unfiltered truth of his own existence. Ask yourself, what would you see if you looked that deeply into your own soul? What would you find if you stopped running from the silence? There is a moment in every solitary journey when the man realizes he is not alone, not in the way the world thinks of loneliness, but in a way far more terrifying and liberating. He realizes he is alone with himself, and that self is vast, uncharted, full of shadows and light he has spent a lifetime avoiding. The longer a man is single, the more he is forced to reckon with this truth, that he is both the question and the answer, that the love he sought outside was always a mirror reflecting back the love he was unwilling to give himself. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of one's fate, not because it is perfect, but because it is yours. Consider the story of the sculptor who chips away at the marble, not to create something new, but to reveal what was always hidden inside. The single man is that sculptor, and his life is the marble. Every day alone is another chip, another layer removed, until what remains is unshakable, undeniable, himself. But here is the challenge. Will he embrace what he finds? Or will he turn away, seeking refuge in the noise of the world, in the arms of another, in anything that will drown out the voice of his own truth? And now, a question for you. Have you ever paused long enough to hear your own thoughts? Not the borrowed ones, not the ones you've been taught to think, but the ones that rise up from the depths when all else falls away. The longer a man is single, the more he hears that voice. At first, it is unsettling. Then, if he dares to listen, it becomes the only voice that matters. This is the gift of solitude, not emptiness, but clarity, not absence, but presence, the presence of the self, unadorned, unafraid. The Stoics taught that the universe is indifferent to our desires. It does not care if we find love or lose it. It does not reward the coupled or punish the solitary. It simply is. And in that indifference lies our freedom. Because if the universe does not dictate our worth, then we must. So I ask you again, what happens to a man when he stops seeking validation in the eyes of another and starts finding it in his own? What becomes of him when he realizes that his worth is not measured by his relationship status, but by the strength of his character? Perhaps you've felt it already. That quiet shift, that stirring in your chest when you realize you are enough. Not because someone else says so, but because you faced yourself and found nothing to fear. If this journey resonates with you, if you felt the weight and the wonder of your own solitude, then you understand why we must keep exploring. There is more to uncover, more to confront. And if you're willing to walk this path a little further, then stay with me. Like and subscribe so we can continue this conversation, so we can keep peeling back the layers together. Because the truth is, this is only the beginning. The longer a man is single, the more he begins to understand that solitude is not a prison, but a throne, a place from which he can survey his kingdom, the vast landscape of his own mind, without illusion, without apology. The world rushes by in pairs and groups, in desperate clusters of belonging, while he stands still. And in that stillness, he discovers something extraordinary. He is free, free from the compromises that erode the soul, free from the silent bargains we make when we trade pieces of ourselves for the warmth of another body beside us. The Stoics asked, what is more valuable, to be loved or to be unshakable? The single man, over time, learns the answer. He learns that the greatest love is not the kind that binds, but the kind that liberates. Think of Seneca, exiled to Corsica, stripped of everything Rome had given him. In that forced solitude, he did not wither. He wrote some of his most enduring letters. He realized that no external loss could diminish him unless he allowed it. The same is true for the man who remains single. Society may label him incomplete, But he knows a secret. He has lost nothing essential. In fact, he has gained something rare, the ability to stand alone in a world that insists on leaning. But here is the paradox. The more comfortable he becomes in his solitude, the more he attracts, not because he seeks it, but because he no longer needs it. There is a magnetism in a man who has made peace with silence, who carries his own weight so effortlessly that others sense it. They circle, curious, wondering how he moves through the world so lightly. What they don't see are the years he spent building that strength brick by brick in the quiet. Yet this path is not without its trials. There are nights when the silence presses in like a weight, when even the strongest man wonders if he has fooled himself, if his independence is just a well-crafted delusion. The Stoics called this the test of the obstacle, the moment when the universe asks, do you really believe what you claim? And so the single man faces his own version of this test. He walks into a room full of laughter and intertwined hands, and for a moment he feels the sting of exclusion. But then he remembers, this is not exclusion, this is choice. He could have chosen differently, could have molded himself into something more palatable, more conventional. But he chose integrity instead. Ask yourself, what is more painful, the loneliness of solitude or the loneliness of being misunderstood in a relationship? The ache of missing someone or the ache of missing yourself because you've contorted into someone else's idea of love? The single man knows both pains, but he has learned that one is temporary while the other is a slow erosion. There is a story of a monk who spent decades in the mountains seeking enlightenment. When he finally descended, villagers asked what wisdom he had gained. He smiled and said, "When I was young, I thought the mountain was a place to escape the world. Now I know it was a place to meet myself." The single man's journey is the same. At first, solitude feels like retreat. Then one day, he realizes it was never about hiding. It was about finding the parts of himself that get drowned out in the noise of relationships, the ambitions he forgot to chase, the passions he set aside to keep the peace, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that he is enough, exactly as he is